Hi everybody, welcome back to the Tuesday Tips. Now we've been missing in action for 2 weeks, but we've been so busy behind the scenes. So just a little catch up so you know what we've been up to. Now first off, I had my first ever sew away where we actually designed with the Sherpa Designs. And as you can see, this was one of the tops that I took everybody step by step how to design it. I just love the style of the drapey top, and then I find it very slimming actually. And then what I've also done, if you're looking at the vest section, it is only a false front that we've put in, so there's nothing on the back, which makes it so comfortable. Again, we also looked at designing it with knits and with wovens as well, so the ladies had the choice of working either with a knit or a woven. The other thing that kept us very busy, and there I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody. Our sewing advent box was absolutely such a hit. You cannot believe how much little prezzies had to be gift wrapped. I think it was over 900 little individual gifting that we had to get gift wrapped for you. So absolutely a great success for us, and I know that without you we couldn't have done it. So thank you so much for actually buying the sewing gift box as well. Now I'm going to pick up where we left off with our last Tuesday tips, which was we were talking about knits and everything you need to know before you actually start sewing knits. So just a recap on it, and I will also at the bottom in the information box I will also put a link to that video. I spoke to you about stretch ratios, how to read the pattern, why do I need a certain amount of stretch for my pattern, what effect does it have on the pattern. Now today we're going to just carry on a little bit, and I want to talk to you about cutting out your knit fabric now. So I'm just going to tell you exactly what to look for, what to avoid, so that you don't have a little bit of an issue when you are wearing your knit garment as well. When you are going to lie out your fabric when you are working with knits, again, the most important part is make sure that the maximum stretch is going to go around the body. We don't want the maximum stretch in the length. Now there is some fabrics out there that has got your two-way stretch, so you've got to determine which one is the maximum stretch. But I've also seen some knit fabrics that's got like a border print on it, and your maximum stretch is actually going lengthwise instead of crosswise. And then you've got to just lay out your fabric differently then, or lay out your pattern differently. Now the way that I've done this fabric here as well, you will see I've brought half to the center and other half to the center. If you've got seam lines on the pattern and they're not necessary on the fold, then you can just fold the fabric in half. That will be fine. But I'm working with more of a t-shirt top as well, just to show you. So I've got my front and my back on a fold. So for me to actually save fabric, I love putting my fabric this way. Now when you are folding it in, you've got to be very, very careful, because I've got to make sure that this fabric is evenly downwards. And if it is not, if I've got a narrower strip there and let's say a wider strip to the bottom, you're going to find that because the fabric isn't laid out correctly, as soon as you make your top, you're going to find that the side seams are going to twist around your body. And I'm sure all of you have bought a t-shirt somewhere and that side seam just keeps shifting and there's nothing you can do about it. You might not even pick it up when you just try something on like that, but after that first wash, I can tell you, you've got a problem. So the first step that you're going to do, and you can see my fabric's already laying out, I've double checked it already, but you're going to put your fabric on your table, and you are going to make sure that when you measure from that center line there where my fabric edge is to the edge of my fabric over here on the fold, that however much I've got there, minus 41. So every time I just move downwards a little bit and I make sure everything is going to be 41 centimeters. If it is not, you are literally moving your fabric. You're just maneuvering it a little bit. You can pick it up and you can do that as well. You want to make sure that everything is nice and even. Then we've already sorted out one issue that we usually find on our knits, and that is the twisting of the garment. So this takes a little bit of time. Be patient with it, but this is going to give you really your professional look that you want. The next thing that you want to do is, if you're working with a long piece of fabric, you don't want it hanging off the table. If it is at the bottom side hanging off, just lift it onto the table, and as you move it up, you can then just go and measure the bottom section again. When there's a long piece of fabric and it's hanging off the table, there's a little bit of a drag on that fabric. You might not see it, but once you start working with it, you are going to pick it up. It's just maybe pulling that bottom side a little bit more, or the top side, and then we are going to have an issue. Now, the next thing that we also wanted to make sure if we are working with our patterns is that when this one is actually very easy and straightforward. This is just on the fold. So that is not an issue. So this one's front and the back is on the fold, which is fine because my fabric is already measured and it's lying correctly on the table. The issue that we sometimes get is when I'm working, let's look at the sleeve, and you can see it's showing a grain line. Now, first off, if we look at the structure of a knit, it is loops that is forming the fabric. If you look at the photo that I'm showing you as well, that is what our knit fabrics look like. A grain on the fabric is with our woven fabrics where we've got a weft and a warp. And the warp is usually your thread that is going downwards, and then the weft is almost worked through that warp, going from the side or selvage to selvage. Now there we've got a grain line. With knits, there's no grain line, even though you will see we still talk about grain lines. Our patterns will still have grain lines indicated on it. That is fine, because this grain line is going to tell me how this pattern piece must be laying out on my fabric. So when I am going to lie it out, I'm again going to take my measuring tape, and I'm going to measure from grain line, and I'm going to take it to the fold, and I can see that is 17 centimeters. Now if I go there, it's actually 16.5, and I'm going to keep moving one section, and I will go and measure again, and again that one has moved also a little bit, 17.5, 17. So what I'm going to do for myself, I'm going to place one fabric weight on there, so that if I'm moving, I'm not really moving this section too much. So let's go double check. I'm on 17.5. I'm on 17, so I know it's just this section that I'm going to maneuver a little bit. I'll go back to it. I'm on 17.5. I double check myself, 17.5. You've got to make sure that this grain line is spaced evenly to the fold. Again, if it is not evenly spaced, again, we are getting twisting of our seams that we're going to work. Because I've seen so many times people don't do this, and they just go lay it out however they can to save fabric, and they say, okay, I'm going to do it like that. Look at how my grain line is going. That is really a no-no. We are going to have an issue if we're doing that. So even though there is really no grain line, we are using this grain line for a guide so that I know my pattern piece is laying out correctly. Some of your knit patterns as well will indicate maybe a grain line. Sometimes they will have a line and it will say maximum stretch on it. So also, if you're working with your patterns, make sure that you do look at that if it's asking for maximum stretch in a certain direction. I was actually sewing bras this weekend, and there you've got to be so careful. So I've got to make sure that my maximum stretch was correct. And there it wasn't really a grain line on that pattern piece. It actually indicated, that line indicated my maximum stretch. So learn to read your pattern pieces, see what it's asking for, but then you are going to lie it out like that. Once I've done it correctly, I'm not going to measure again now. I love working with my pattern weights, and I love working with a rotary cutter. You can go pin it. Please, when you are working with your knits, don't go and put 100 pins, because as I'm pinning, I am slightly stretching that fabric a little bit, especially on something that's got quite a bit of a stretch on it. So I would, if I'm going to use a pin, I might pin over there, I might pin halfway, I will pin over there as well. So I will do a couple of pins, but I've seen also pins going, they do like 20 pins down there. Please don't do it. Every time I'm pushing that pin through, that bottom fabric is shifting a little bit. So we've got to be aware of that as well. So if you can, and these are pattern weights that we do sell, so you can always just work with your pattern weights or anything heavy that you've got. Sometimes if I need a couple more pattern weights, I've got some metal pattern weights that I use as well. You can even, a heavy tin, anything like that, you can go add on there, but I don't pin when I am going to cut this out. If you don't have a rotary cutter and you're going to cut out again with your scissors, please be aware, if I'm doing it, I hold the fabric before I put my scissors in. And as I'm cutting there, I'm actually holding the fabric, because with lifting the scissors up and down, this fabric, look at the stretch of it, look how it's moving. All right, so I do tend to put my hand down, I'll hold the fabric and I'll cut a section. I'll move to the next section, I hold my fabric and I cut it. That way I am not pulling the fabric to the side or out to the side. Again, something that specifically if we are working with something that's more fitted, it's so important to get our seams correctly. So that is the one other tip, is with the cutting out. But if you've got a rotary cutter, I'm going to tell you, just use your rotary cutter. For me, it is a smoother cut. It doesn't shift my fabric either. So for me, that is what I'm going to suggest. And then lastly, what we have to do, if you've got any notches on your pattern, and those are the little triangles that we have, please mark the notches on your pattern pieces, especially with a knit. I've seen where people take a knit pattern piece, or that they've cut out already, and they start pinning from the bottom all the way to the top. When they come to the bottom, from the bottom, listen to me, from the top to the bottom. I've seen when they do it that way, by the time they get to one point, sometimes the fabric is out that much, and it's because of the nature of the fabric. So please don't go and just snip it off and think that's correct. So again, with knits especially, you're going to pin one point, I'm going to pin another point so that they are even. I will lift my pattern pieces up and make sure I almost want to say I shake it a little bit, and then I will take the middle point and I will put a pin. Then I can do in between. That is usually my pins that I do. That for me is more than enough. So please make sure that if you are folding these pattern pieces, and I'm just going to fold this. Let's imagine this is our fabric. When I've actually folded this, and if there's a notch, the notch always gets pinned as well. I make sure my notch will match up. So I will pin the top, I will pin the bottom, I will pin in between. I will go, if there's a notch, I make sure that's matching up. Sometimes your notches are more down, then I will go and do my pins there as well. It has happened in classes, and that's why I keep stressing it, that someone pinned and the bottom almost looks like that. And all they do, they lay it down and they go snip it off. That's a no-no. Please don't do that, because you are going to pick up problems. Again, it's going to pull that sleeve if you are going to wear it. So that is what you've got to look for when you are going to be cutting out. Now, if you follow these tips that I've given you for cutting out your knits, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have minimum problems when you are going to be sewing it. My major thing, really, I think that I've picked up is that the pinning that is incorrect, and they just go and snip it off. I've seen it even done on a shoulder seam. So please make sure, even on the shoulder, we pin this point, and I'll do one in between. And that fabric has got enough movement so that I can work it in together. So there's no need for it to be having one piece longer than another. Look, it can happen maybe if you didn't cut out correctly, that one seam is a little bit longer, but again, most of the time it's the pinning that's incorrect. So that is the one tip. Again, something to never ever ever forget is the maximum stretch around the body. As soon as that maximum stretch is not around the body, and you are cutting out your pattern and you're going to make it, it's not going to fit you. It's going to be feeling so tight as if it's restricting you. So that is another thing. And then lastly, and I'm just going over this again because this makes or breaks the garment that you are going to sew, is that if you are lying your fabric on the table, make sure that you are measuring it, that you are making sure that it is even from the top to the bottom of your fabric. And that way we are going to prevent all that twisting that we do get when we are working with the knits. Now, if you don't have fabric weights, this is really for, I think our garment sewers is really a must-have. I think we've still got a little bit of this in the store. If we don't have, I will be ordering in again, because I don't sew without these. Even if I pattern design, I put this onto my patterns that I am designing to prevent shifting. So follow the rules for your preparation, for your cutting out. And then there is really lots of information on sewing with knits. I've even showed you some, or done some videos where I discussed sewing with knits, and especially overlocker tips when I'm sewing with knits. So go look at that as well, so that when you go and do your next knit project, that you've got all of this information already worked through, so that you know it's going to work out for you.